seriously, you know, it could be a little.
All the people in my family, all my women are familiar with this problem.
Yeah, it's animal in the water. So, can we take a seat now?
Go ahead, yeah. So welcome everybody to Career Development Network. My name is Susan Langford and I manage this program for NCBiotech. I want to first walk through some resources for job seekers that we have here at NCBiotech. And so when you go to our webpage, our homepage, ncbiotech.org, you'll see this, the tabs across the top. If you click on careers and training, you'll come to this dashboard where you can get to most of the resources I'll go through quickly here. So the first is our Career Center, which is a jobs board. This is a newly implemented jobs board here. It scrapes biotech jobs in North Carolina from company websites throughout the state. So this is a great place to look for jobs, biotech-related jobs in North Carolina. We also have a company directory. This is fully searchable, so I recommend using this if you want to have a target list of companies. So you can search on RNA or ag biotech, and it'll pull up all of the companies doing that kind of work within the state. Here's our Career Development Network page showing our upcoming sessions, but then also we have recordings of previous sessions if you want to look at those. We support about 25 different what we call intellectual exchange groups here at NCBiotech. They cover pretty much any topic you might be interested in, from plant molecular biology, biomanufacturing and process development. There are some groups that are related to regulatory topics and Triangle Women in STEM, Women in Bio. Like I said, there are 25 different groups, so they're great ways to get out and network. So I recommend checking those out. And then we have a newsletter called The Dish. If you want to stay up to date about jobs, training opportunities, other news in the biotech sphere. So I recommend subscribing to that. And then we also have a LinkedIn group. So this can really expand your reach, like if you're doing informational interviews or want to find contacts at companies that you might be interested in. I encourage you to join our LinkedIn group. Some upcoming events that I thought might be of interest. Next Tuesday here at NCBiotech is the Triangle Women in STEM AI workshop. That's going to be a 4-hour workshop with an AI expert. That'll be followed by Triangle Women in STEM happy hour at the Boxyard. There's a NC Biopharma networking group that'll take place in Holly Springs on the same day, Tuesday of next week. There's a biotechnology networking event at Central Carolina Community College campus in Sanford the following week on the 29th. August 14th, there's a Women in Bio Summer Bash. And then there's an ag-related event on August 18th here at NCBiotech. Bites to Bytes, Innovations in AI and Data in Ag Biotech. And then our next Career Development Network will be the first in an AI series that we're doing. The speaker in August will be talking about using AI in your job search. So on with our, oops, that's not what I meant to do. So on with our panel discussion. This is our moderator, David Rosenthal. He's my colleague here at NCBiotech. He works in our Emerging Company Development Group and is the manager of our industrial internship program. And so I'll let David take it from here.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, welcome to all of you here in person, those of you joining us online as well. don't know how much we really fully need the mics on these, but I'll do my best to speak into it. As Susan said, I run our industrial internship program, and so that is a grant program that NCBiotech runs that provides some funding as well as logistical support to companies that are hiring internships for the summer. And we also sort of help funnel those applications in and connect those companies to the people that might work for them over the course of spring and summer. That said, give the rest of the panel a chance to introduce themselves so I don't mangle their bios and get those details offset. So Tony, go for it.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tony Bucci. I'm the founder and CEO of Sable Fermentation. So we are a biomanufacturing fermentation process development facility located in Wake Forest. I'm pretty sure we're the only life science company in Wake Forest based on how long it took us to get permits. But so I've spent most of my career in ag tech. So I worked for BASF for many years. So I worked for Big Ag, and then I went to a startup company called Ag Biome, where I was their chief operating officer and CEO for almost 5 years. I left in 2023 to start Sable, and we are quite interested in having interns for many reasons. We're passionate about workforce development, but we also are looking to hire folks that are fresh out of school, whether they be high school, community college, bachelor's degree, or master's degree. 75% of our employees have PhDs, so we don't think we need any more PhDs right now, but we are looking to not only help workforce development, but also selfishly looking to hire future talent.
Should be good.
They control it. They. Is this coming through? Yes. Oh, okay. Didn't sound very amplified. My name's Adam Wax. I'm the CEO and founder of Lumedica. We are a medical device company located in downtown Durham. We develop low-cost retinal imaging devices for the developing world. We ship a lot of these to India and other places around the globe. We've taken on interns through the IIP program for maybe the last 5 years. It's a great way to get exposure to a medical device company, other biotech companies. From the company point of view, it's a great way for us to establish a relationship with someone, find out what their skills and strengths are, and they have led to permanent hires for us. So, I think that is a real valuable aspect of getting a good internship, is that it can lead to a good job after you graduate.
Hi, I'm Terry Mitchell, and I spent 30 years at IBM, so I am not in the bio arena, but I was a computer scientist by training, and I ran a lot of different organizations for IBM. After 30 years, I started a program called Accelerate Success, which is focused on college women in STEM. I'm also on the board of Triangle Women in STEM, which Susan mentioned is an intellectual exchange group as part of NCBiotech. And I'm really happy to be here with you.
So just sort of as an approach here, I think what we'll do is I have a sort of set of questions. We'll sort of run through those, but also give you all, anybody here, either in person or online, an opportunity to throw some questions to these folks as well. And I think really and I think you've sort of hit on this a little bit, but I think sort of makes sense to sort of talk through both the start, middle, and the end of the internship experience and parts of those and where the value may be. So I guess just throw it to Tony and Adam first. Where is the biggest value you see in having an intern join your company? Why are you really bringing them into your company for a short window of time?
Well, I mean, like I said, for us, the big thing is evaluating talent to look for future hires. That's really the number one reason we do it. So we're not necessarily looking for another set of hands, even though a lot of times students will sell themselves as, oh, I've done all this before, so I can help you do it. We're not really interested in that. We're interested in training and understanding to what level of curiosity you have when you come into our organization. So that's the number one benefit, but there's another benefit, and that is that you bring in an outside perspective, a fresh perspective that we don't have doing the job day in, day out. So for example, we have 2 interns right now. And one of them is creating, this is amazing, she's creating a curriculum on how to teach homeschooled children how to do fermentation so that homeschoolers can learn what other students are learning in high school labs. And we're going to put that on our website. And I just thought that was genius because we're so interested in workforce development that fits right into our strategy. So there are new ideas that come in, and also it's a way for interns to explore their own passions and apply something that the rest of us don't have. None of us are school teachers. Turns out one of our interns is a school teacher in the public school system. So she has really completely different and much appreciated ideas.
Well, along those lines, we also like to bring in interns because they bring a fresh energy. So, I view it as like a force multiplier. So, instead of just having someone who's doing their job and you get locked into your job, you don't get a chance to try new things or, evaluate new programs. But if you get the right intern and they've got an excitement and an interest in these new fields, they can come in and they can, go in entirely new directions. So, this summer we've got a fellow named Will who's come in and he's, taken to SolidWorks and he's designing new parts for us for, new development projects that maybe we wouldn't have had the time for with just our regular employees. So it's a nice breath of fresh air.
And Terry, maybe from your perspective, to speak to the interns' positives, and when going into an internship, what are sort of the real values that they should be looking at getting out of the overall experience?
So, of course, it's always a good resume builder, right? But more importantly, this is your chance to have an agreed to short-term trial run. When you get out into a full-time job, you really don't have that short-term trial run. So this allows you to go into an environment, see what you like, see how you can apply what you've been learning, what you don't like. A lot of times interns will think, oh, I didn't like my internship, and it was a big fail. Finding out what you don't like early is so valuable. And if you're following LinkedIn, and I wouldn't recommend you do this, but people don't put out there, I had the worst summer of my life. It's not a good post, but think about how valuable it is to learn that I liked the work, but I did not like the company. Or I like the company, but geez, I need to adjust my course. It's really, really valuable. On the other side, learning, I really love this work. I'd love to work here longer. With today's economy, there's some diciness to it. And I do see companies still hiring university hires, but some of them are only prioritizing what you would call intern conversion, meaning we're going to make full-time hires only to our interns. So that is valuable if it meets your goals.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Yeah, I'll say for myself, I used to work in education, and similar advice. I used to always encourage aspiring teachers to do their student teaching in what they thought was the worst environment possible for them, because it has a definite end date on it, and I think that's really a valuable part of that experience. So with that said, sort of once an intern is part of your company for whatever window of time it is, and they're showing up every day, how is your interaction with an intern different, or is it different than your sort of suite of full-time employees and the people that are a longer part of your company? Is their niche different, or are they just one of the same?
I'll jump in. Well, I would say it is slightly different. So there's certain expectations that we have of an intern that we would have with a standard employee, that you show up every day, you show up on time, you don't come in if you're sick, things like that. But one of the things that we always do is spend a couple of days talking about what the intern wants to get out of the internship. So what are his or her goals for the time they'll spend with us? And sometimes, because we've been part of the IIP as well, and so we tend to get a lot of process engineers that apply for our roles, but we had one last year who wanted to understand the business side and not just the science. And so I spent extra time with her, talking to her about the business side, and she ended up making the decision to do an MBA at the end of her internship. So she was studying at BTech at NC State, and which was a very highly technical area. Her undergraduate degree was in process engineering, but she decided to go do a go do an MBA. So we feel like it's just as important to understand what you as the employee, as an intern, want to get out of that. Because you may start and realize that, hey, I don't think running fermentations is really for me. I thought it might be. That's great, but you know what? You've got 2 months left. Let's give you something that you will walk away with and say, now that I did like. And that's going to help me decide what I want to do going forward.
I think for us, we want the intern to gain the experience of what it's like to be in industry. So, uniformly, these are engineers coming from academia. They're studying to get their degrees. And when you do a class project, very often there's an answer that they expect, and there's a process they expect you to follow. Whereas in industry, you're much more goal-driven, and there may not be a readily apparent answer, right? This isn't the right answer, but we've come to an optimal solution for this engineering problem. So we are trying to get them to follow our procedures, to be part of our meeting. So I'll typically have a engineering meeting once a week with the group, and the intern will come in. I would say by the second or third week, they're encouraged to have their own independent part of this project and to report orally at these meetings. So doing PowerPoint presentations, and I'm a professor during my day job, so I'm likely to quiz you about specific aspects of it. And this is an important part if you're going to be successful in industry, right? Because you may have a supervisor who's encouraging and wants you to do stuff, but you also may have a supervisor who's going to give you what for at these meetings. And coming prepared with answers to all these questions is a good thing for a developing engineer to understand, is how do I prepare myself to answer any questions that might be asked of me. So I would say for us, it's more about teaching the intern how to be successful in our industry, in the medical device industry, rather than trying to adapt it to that intern necessarily.
So I'm going to go off my script a little bit, just because your answer, Tony, sort of prompted a question that I hear sometimes, and Terry, you might have some insight to this, but I'm happy to hear from any three of you, is the intern is in this sort of interesting position of having a role and serving a need for the company, but they're there for their own interests and needs as well. This is an experience they want to get something out of. And so sometimes I do hear about interns who sort of say, I don't know, am I being selfish by doing what I wanted? Like, how do I balance my needs or interests or what I'm looking to get out of this experience with what the company is asking me to do? And so I'm curious if you hear that issue, or sort of what your advice are to interns in that balancing mode.
Yeah, and it is a balance, right? You do want to get out of this experience an understanding and growth for yourself about the industry, about your skills, what I had mentioned before. You also want to demonstrate value to the company. So you have to deliver. And what's interesting is a lot of interns don't have the discussion about expectations. And here's something that may shock you, may not. You're not always going to get a good manager as an intern or a full-time employee. In fact, I think if 50% of the time you get a really good manager, you're doing great. Most time you're going to get kind of middle of the road managers for whatever reason. So as an intern, you may have to prompt the discussion about expectations. And that makes some college students uncomfortable. But if that manager, that company doesn't welcome that kind of discussion, then that's a big message for you right there. So you have to, one, think, what do I want to get out of this experience? What we were talking about earlier, other than delivering. What learning do I want? You need to think about that, be able to articulate that clearly. Then you want to understand, what are the expectations for me as an intern in delivering? When do you expect me to be independent? Do I have a mentor? Who's going to give me directions? Who's going to give me assignments? those are discussions you need to have. If they're not prompted to you, you need to sit down with your boss or your team lead and have those conversations.
Maybe that's great. And one thing to add is, I think it's absolutely okay if an intern comes in and says, I don't really know what I need to get out of this internship. Maybe you can help me. Because we have one intern that came through the IIP, and she's super bright. She has a lot of experience in fermentation, and so we have her on a couple of projects to do fermentation, and she's learned how to take them apart, how to put them together. But I said, maybe you would like to have exposure to legal contracts. So she's doing a project with us on legal, and she's found that she actually likes that, which is amazing to me. But anyway, so I think it's okay to say, I don't know, help expose me. Give me some ideas. What projects do you have? I had another project that was around customer relationship management, which is where you would have the opportunity to get to know essentially any biotechnology company in the state and beyond that's doing biotechnology that comes to us for service. And I thought they'd jump all over that, and they were like, yeah, not really. So I was like, okay, fine, we'll move on to something else. So I think it's really okay to say, I'm not really sure, or to say, as long as I get this one thing, I'm good. And I'm happy to do anything else, but I really want to get exposure here. So I wouldn't stress too much about it, but I fully agree that you should be having that conversation with the new manager. What are the expectations that you have of me? And I would hope that they would then ask you, what do you want to get out of this internship?
Yeah, I do think it's worth acknowledging, like there's sort of the stereotype of the bad internship out there where you're just going and collecting coffee every day and you're not being a meaningful part of that experience. And I'm sure that those internships do exist out there, but I think the reality is, and through IIP, we really focus on experiences that will be meaningful to the intern and valuable to the company. But I think it's worth keeping in mind that most people don't want to hire someone just to collect coffee. That's not really a valuable use of anybody's time or money. And so they do value that conversation for the most part as well. So then the other part of this then is that before I throw this to anybody else who has their questions, I'm happy to keep asking them. I have a long list. The other end of the experience, one of those things that I think a lot of interns see as a value is those connections that extend beyond the end date of your contract, and you finish your work and then you have connections that you've made, you have people who can be references, recommendations, whatever that may be. Though I do often hear that there is sort of this worry that, you all are busy people. And they're, I don't know if I want to keep asking them to do this for me or to write the letter or whatever it may be. So just from your perspective of getting those requests, sort of how much of a lift is it on you for these interns to, ask you for references, connections, sort of what are the best ways that you see on your side to maintain that connection post-internship experience?
Sure. So, coming from academia, I recognize the most valuable currency coming out of the internship is a good recommendation afterwards. So, I'm always responsive and always glad to write good letters for our interns, assuming, of course, that they've, done a good job and didn't set fire to the place or anything like that. Not a hassle at all to ask for recommendations. And, if you've done a good job in your internship, your supervisor or advisor should turn around and say, hey, you did a great job here. I'd be glad to write you a letter of recommendation. I'm always sure to, tell our interns exactly that.
I'm a huge, huge fan of developing your network, huge, and keeping it alive for many years. And just keep in mind that it's not a burden to ask someone, hey, can you give me some advice or can you write a letter of recommendation? Because it goes both ways. We want to develop and build our network too, because at some point you're going to be in the workforce. You might be a customer, you might be an employee, you might be a supplier to us. You might just be someone in the industry that becomes a very trusted source for us. So I have 3 grown children who've all gone through what all of you are going through or have gone through, where they were looking for internships and they were afraid to reach out to someone on LinkedIn to say, hey, you don't know me. My son wanted to go into sports management, so he was like, well, how am I going to get somebody from NASCAR to talk to me and from the Yankees to talk to me? And I was like, okay, you just need to put yourself out there because people love to talk about themselves. So if you say, hey, I want to hear about your career or whatever, they'll almost never say no. So, but I would say keep in mind that it is a two-way street. And so I have never said no to a request for mentoring, advice, writing a letter of recommendation. It's never bothered me because we were all there at some point. We know what it's like and how valuable it can be. And I would just say I would take it as something you should do for your career to keep that network alive. So you do an internship, don't drop off the face of the earth. Either link into them through LinkedIn or some social media, get their email address, periodically reach out and just say, hey, I'm thinking about my internship, or hey, want to let you know, here's what I'm doing now. I've moved to California, and even if they don't respond to you, I guarantee you they're reading it because they develop a relationship with you when you're an intern. I mean, every intern I've ever had since I was a graduate student, I can tell you every one of their names and what they're doing now because I really, really value that. And I think I'm not unusual in that. I think most of us are like that. So don't be shy and just make sure you keep it alive because even people that have been professionals for 25 years are not always good at keeping that network alive. And it is so important for your career development.
I wanted to just add, I am a big proponent of LinkedIn as a great vehicle to keep connections and the LinkedIn recommendation because you can ask somebody to write a recommendation and then everybody can see it versus multiple. I also am a big proponent of helping provide some talking points for your recommendation because I know people come to me and I love Sally. I love Joe. But then when I sit there with my fingers at the keyboard, it's like, what am I going to write? So I recommend, saying, would you please write me a recommendation for LinkedIn? I was really proud of this and that I did for you over the summer. Or I feel like my biggest innovation was blah, blah, blah. Then when the person sits down to write it, they can get it started, then they can run it through ChatGPT, and it sounds really great, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great tool for keeping in touch. I mean, back in the day, you had to like call people or write them letters. It was a real hassle.
Yeah.
I want to share a story about a former intern of mine. So I was giving a talk in Washington, D.C. It was for, optic startups, of which I'm a part. And the fellow that was introducing me tells a story about how 15 years ago, he came into my office, asked me a bunch of questions, and he said what a great guy I was because I just gave him all this career advice, and I wasn't like trying to get anything out of him. I was just, offering pearls of wisdom, as it were, and it made a huge difference. Now he's the CEO of this big company up in DC and remembers fondly how I was able to network with him. So it was really nice. And
Nice we told you that so many years later, too.
it was, and it was just because we happened to be at the same, presentation. It was a nice thing. But I think most people will be really flattered if you're asking them for career advice because it's sort of a tacit, recognition that they've done something right. You want to learn something from them. And timing can be important, right? If they're clearly like freaking out, pulling out their hair and yelling on the phone, maybe not the time to ask them for mentoring advice, but how about a cup of coffee and we'll get together and talk? I think most people would take you up on that.
And I'll use this opportunity to put forth a piece of advice that I often throw out to students when I'm talking about the industrial internship program, which is that IIP mostly serves very small companies. And I do think that that's something that comes up a lot when I talk to students that are looking to apply to internships. Some students, they see this list of companies and they don't know any of these company names. And it's sort of, I think, natural to say, oh, I want an internship at, the Pfizers of the world, the giant corporations that are going to look, you're going to see that line on your resume, it's going to be great. And I always encourage students to think about this part of the experience, those connections, those networking, when you recognize that when you do an internship at a company that only has a handful of employees, that your day-to-day work will be with, C-levels, CEOs and people that are running the company. And so when it's about who's going to be that person who can write that recommendation letter for me or can make those connections, being a part of that world and those connections, I think is incredibly valuable, more so than, and not to say you can't have a great experience doing an internship at somewhere like Pfizer, but it's going to be a hiring manager or with a suite of other interns rather than people that are running companies, which I think is a really valuable part of that experience.
David, I think the impact that you can make at a small company, as one of 10 people or one of 20 people is much larger, and you'll work with engineers solving real problems, whereas at a Pfizer, you may be like a pre-canned program where they run you around. Oh, let's look at the process today, and then, oh, let's all view this. It's like the equivalent of watching the VCR movie back in high school, right? So let's look at this video and then, sign off on this training. At the small companies, you may be doing a significant bit to row the boat forward where you're actually contributing to a product or a process that may become a commercial product at some point.
I think at this point, I'm happy to open up to questions anybody else has for the panel before I put any additional ones out there. If there aren't any, that's fine. Go for it.
Hey, Chris Shepard, I appreciate the insights you're sharing today. Sort of I think, a unique position for myself, so I'll throw this question out there. Most of the internships are geared more towards kind of entry level, fresh out of school. What is the appetite that you see for internships for more senior folks who are looking to career pivot from a different industry into the biotech space? Thanks.
That's like the Robert De Niro movie, right? Where he's going to go back later. I have to admit that we've mostly had, college kids, sometimes master's students, so very often they'll do that. I think that's worth a conversation on your part before, just sending a resume into your standard internship. I don't think that it might get as much attention, but it's the kind of thing where if you reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm really interested in your industry. Do you think I could spend some time with your company over the summer? And I think you'd have to make it clear that the compensation isn't necessarily what's important, right? So if you're more experienced, you should be getting paid more, and yet an internship just won't, warrant that. But if you're really out there just for the experience, I think working the LinkedIn network and telling folks, I'd like to spend some time with your company could be really valuable.
Yeah, and I'll add to that sometimes it's not about getting a job for 3 months. You can do shadowing. We could work on projects. And that is super easy for a company to do shadowing. And that's a chance to start to get to know the company and for them to get to know you and for you to say, you know what, I worked in X and here's how we did it. Does that apply here? And then you can start to build your brand a little bit with the company and they can see what you're going to bring to the table. We did have one intern application this summer where the gentleman was probably in his mid-30s, I would say. And in his case, he had jumped from industry to industry to industry and industry, like every year and a half. He was doing medical coding for a while, and then he was writing a book, and then he was applying for an internship at our place, and we were like, we're failing to see the connection. It just seems like you've been on a journey to survey a whole bunch of different things to figure out where your fit is. But I love that suggestion because if he'd reached out to me, because I would have told him that, I would have said, listen, I'm not really clear. And he could have said, it would have been a great opportunity for him to say, well, here's what I think I can bring. I have all this diverse experience, and here's why I'm interested in coming to Sable Fermentation. So, but I mean, and this applies to everyone. We don't have a huge facility. We don't bring in more than 2 interns in a summer, and it tends to be the summer, but we can also do shadowing. We can usually take in a second or a third if the money is not so important. So that's difficult sometimes, but you could say, look, I can work part-time at a job where it helps me pay the bills, and I can come in maybe on Friday afternoons and work with you, or I can do a shadowing, or if I'm on spring break, I'd be happy to do a week, or Christmas holiday. We were literally just talking about this a couple days ago. That doesn't have to necessarily be the summer, but in those cases, I would say, reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm happy to come in over spring break, or I can come in on Friday afternoons, or if you've got weekend work, and then just throw it out there, because most of us love the go-getters, and so we're always happy to accommodate those kinds of suggestions, so if that helps.
I wanted to hook on to something David said that applies here. I would focus on the smaller companies. Having spent 30 years, actually more than that, because I also worked at GE before IBM, it's like an act of Congress to try to get the processes changed. And then you have to go see the Pope after. So it's just not going to happen. They have in their higher, the process is to be an intern, you have to be enrolled full-time at some school. It's not going to change, period. So go for the smaller companies that are much more flexible. You can actually talk to a person. They don't have 10,000 applications. Some of these large companies have 10,000, so they're just not gonna be flexible.
Yeah, I want to add something else too, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone in here, but so I worked for BASF for 23 years, and every year, it didn't matter if I was in research and development or if I was running a business, I hired interns. And we always selected the best of the best. So we were looking for the honor students, the valedictorians, the folks that have 6 refereed published papers. And most of us don't have that type of resume, right? You may, and if you do, great. But where I am now is I look to not necessarily hire those people because I know they will have opportunities elsewhere. I want to hire normal people that need an internship experience like everybody else, but tend to not get it. There was a woman last year that kind of came in second place that I told her, I said, I would have you in a heartbeat. I don't have the money to pay you. If you want to come in and work the summer, you don't even have to work 40 hours. You don't have to be on time. I mean, just come in and I'll help you because I know you need this. She was a rising senior at NC State. She had no work experience at all, not even like an internship. And I thought, she's going to need this because she doesn't have all these accolades to get in with a big company. So hopefully it doesn't offend anybody. But if you have all that, great. But if you don't, that's okay too, because we all need those experiences.
I just want to endorse that also, that, the 4.0 student may not be the best fit for industry, right? So a 4.0 student is used to doing good in the classroom where there's always an answer in front of them and maybe not being able to work off the chart. Instead, what I really look for is that someone is kind of a pest, right? So they're really showing a dedicated interest to it. So very often, if I get a request for shadowing, I may be like, no, not interested. And, if they go away, that's fine. But if they come back, Dr. Wax, I'm really interested in this and I want to pursue this. And I may say no again. But, if they're persistent and keep coming back, then I say, okay, this person's got a spark and a fire under them that they want to do what it is that I need them to do. And in that case, I'm willing to invest that time. All right. So just throwing out your shingle for a 4.0 student with lots of papers, again, they probably do have lots of opportunities. But will they be as dedicated and devoted to doing the job that you need? Maybe not. I mean, not to bash 4.0 students. They're very focused and do very well. But I really like to see that persistence, that there's an interest and that they're willing to follow up and express that to me.
Hi, so I was wondering about, like, for example, if you're at the beginning of your career, you might be more in the attitude part, but if you are more developed and you're PhD level or something in that realm, maybe it's more expertise realm. So in the internship part, how do you see that balance about you're starting to have an expert opinion? Sometimes they call it that and you don't like it at all. So that part about having that expertise, but being in an internship, trying to pivot.
That's the imposter syndrome, right? So that's where you reach a certain level where you realize, oh, my opinion does matter and I do know what I'm talking about. So it's a confidence thing. But by having positive experiences where your expertise is recognized and you're like, oh, I did know the answer to that question, that helps you build that up. Regarding PhD students, I do think it's a very valuable part of a PhD to be able to get an internship. I've graduated 23 PhD students from my group at Duke, and I would say the past half dozen or so have gone into industry, and they've gone out to California and worked for, the Googles and the Metas of the world. And first of all, by doing that type of internship, you're able to get some experience, but it's also about shedding that stink of academia off of you, right? So the things you do in academia, I don't know if you can tell, my opinion on it, right? You have these pre-canned answers, but getting that type of real experience, even as a PhD student, can be really valuable because it shows that you understand the difference in priority between school and industry, and that you're familiar with the process for getting things done in industry, right? Which is through meetings and oral presentations to your supervisor rather than writing a homework example and turning it in for a grade. So yeah, I would encourage, if you're a PhD student, I would encourage you to get some industry experience. And there's actually a really good program at the National Science Foundation, although I don't know what the status of it is right now. But there was this intern, it was literally the acronym spelled out intern. And so if you were supported by an NSF grant, they would give you like $65,000 to go to pursue an internship at a company. And so basically NSF would pick up that tab, kind of like IIP does, right? To help you get that experience. So, if you keep your eyes open, you can probably get an internship that'll be free for the company. And that's always an attractive thing.
We have a couple questions from online attendees. One is, how can you identify a good mentor on your first day?
Look for the name tag that says, I'm a mentor.
You have to know what you want out of a mentor. So mentors aren't just walking around with halos, right? That you can see the halo and say, oh, yeah, that would be a good person. What do you want out of a mentor? Do you want somebody that's deep into the scientific realm that you're in? Do you want somebody that maybe will grow your understanding of the business aspect? And your manager, if you can communicate what you're looking for, your manager should help make that connection.
I agree with all that. And I would also say, understanding if they've mentored others, and you're not the first person they've ever mentored, could be helpful. And sometimes I would have bosses call me and ask me to mentor their employees. And I always said, it's not going to happen unless they come to me and tell me what they're interested in and what they want to get out of it. I wouldn't do it because I didn't want them coming, kicking and screaming. But first day is kind of tough. But if they can maybe have a conversation with their new manager or their new colleagues to say, hey, have you mentored folks before? This is what I might be interested in, to see if there's a fit.
If I may, I don't think there is a perfect mentor out there. I mean, they don't hand out halos like that. But if I think back on the mentors that I've had, I've learned important things from each of them. And so as you develop your own management style, your own way of, doing business, you will interact with people. And if you can recognize, something in that mentor that you would like to have for yourself, then you can build up your own style from all of these pieces. So I think it's a really tall task to say on the first day that, this is the mentor, but rather, take a look and say, what does this person do successfully? Why do people trust their leadership and their management? And what can I learn from them? And that way, if you're just trying to pick up, a specific skill, the converse can work also. You could be like, why do they want to kill this guy, right? So maybe I don't do that in my mentorship style. So you can also see things that are not successful from the mentor.
I'm just going to add one thing real quick on this topic, which is, part of the reason we asked these folks to be here is because of having a lot of experience working with interns and being in that role. One of the advice that a few of us have talked about is that idea of doing internships in small companies. One thing that I see in IIP, though, is sometimes those small companies don't have that experience hiring interns. And so they may be good mentors, but they may not have mentored anybody before, may not have done a lot of that hiring. And I think something to keep in mind from that sort of mentorship side of things, it is not just like a job somebody has to input this to you, but it's a relationship. And you are new in that role, but they may be very new in that role as well. And it's not necessarily something where they're just going to decide, oh, I will mentor you and I will, impart to you this information. But it grows through a relationship that builds over time throughout your entire experience. So not necessarily a day one experience, but something that you might not even realize is happening until you finish that experience.
We have another online question. It's for someone interested in the industry, how valuable is undergraduate science research versus practical skills?
For us, it's not important at all. I mean, because we're not hiring people to be an extra set of hands. What we do know is that if someone applies to, let's say, do scale-up fermentation, and they've had some experience in lab work, and we see that through their coursework or maybe a previous internship they have it, then we start thinking, okay, what's the next level? What can we give them that they haven't already gotten? And that might fit our desires or needs, depending upon what we're looking for. But we're not hiring a full-time employee. We're hiring somebody that we can help them develop and see what their ability to learn new skills, the level of curiosity and passion that they have for it. That's what we're looking for, more so than we're looking for actual experience. I don't want to speak for Adam, but
I do look for some relevant experience. So, you're coming for an internship. I don't expect you to know everything that we do. Otherwise, why would you come to us and there would be nothing for us to teach you? But it's important that you have one skill that you can come in on day one and be an active contributor. So, for example, when I'm looking through resumes of a student who has SolidWorks experience, I say, oh, we can put them to work doing mechanical design, and they'll be able to contribute immediately while they learn the electronics and optics that also go into our products. So, as you're developing your resume and, developing your skill set, look for those marketable skills and list them out there. Yeah, I can program in Python. I can do SolidWorks. I can solder and assemble PCBs or whatever it may be. But that's a good way to make a match with a potential employer, so you have a skill that they can use right away.
Just to add on to that, I have found that students sometimes think under their experience headings on their resume, they had to have been paid to list it as an experience. And no, it doesn't, you can make a work experience category, but to hook on to that, what is your marketable skills? If you did a semester-long project in a lab, you should be putting that on your resume under pertinent skills or technical skills or scientific experience. Doesn't have to be paid.
There's a link to that though, right? So if you're going to list a project that you have on your resume, something that you did, you better be well prepared to speak about that project.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that's the advantage. We talked about like an undergrad research project. It's not that you completed the project, but rather it's a good thing to talk about in the interview, right? So you've listed it on, I did so-and-so in Professor X's lab, and well, what did you do there? Well, I did cell culture and I did transfection, and well, tell us about a challenge you have there. Okay, well, all the cells died and I had to figure out where the infection was coming from or something like that. So realize that the things that you list on your resume are prompts for discussion during the interview. The only thing a resume will do is get you the interview, and then you've got to get the job there. So have good talking points prepared.
I interact with a lot of recruiters, and that is one challenge they said that they find with their candidates. They may have a fabulous resume, and then when they ask them questions that go beyond the words on the page, the candidate stumbles. So really be prepared to have discussions about that experience, not just what the words say.
I want to add something else. So there was a high school student, she's at the North Carolina School of Science Mathematics. So they're a high-level magnet school that requires application process, and it's residential. And she is in a STEM program, but she's interested in communications. So that's really what she wants to do. And so what I find is a lot of students, especially when they're very young, they gravitate to pharmaceuticals. They want to do pharma, or maybe they want to do medical devices. They never think about agriculture, which is where I spent most of my career. So I'm always on a mission. And she asked me, but I'm interested in communications. Can I do that in agriculture? And I was like, heck yeah, we're a business. So Sable is a business. I would bring her in a heartbeat to do our social media presence. She could do our LinkedIn posts twice a week. She could build our presence on Facebook or TikTok or whatever. We don't have anybody in our company that's doing that. We literally don't have anybody that's doing that. So we're not looking for necessarily, if we're hiring an intern to do fermentation, you don't necessarily have to have fermentation experience. But if you've got something that you can apply from another industry or something that you're interested in, like the school teacher we have, she's the first teacher to build a biotechnology program at a high school in the country. She's with us on a fellowship from NSF, actually. So I mean, initially I thought, what will a school teacher bring us? Oh my gosh, we have staff meetings every week and we go around the room and our interns get a chance to talk about what they've learned, what their interests are. Every week she has an idea that we would never have thought of that makes us a better company as a result. Her name's Jasmine Jones, and then we have the other intern, Caitlin Jones, if you ever want to look them up, because they're going to be rock stars. We have the Jones, we're keeping up with the Joneses at Sable, so.
Don't want to necessarily report this to David, but in addition to our engineering interns, we hire a marketing intern every summer. So this summer we've got this wonderful young lady from Penn State. She's a poli-sci major. But what she does is she maintains our social media presence. So she's on there, she's posting on LinkedIn, does some Instagram because that's what the kids do. But we've taught her a lot of good things. So now she's able to build and maintain a web page. So she's done that for us. And she brought like nice fresh graphics to it because she was versed with the generative AI where you can just tell it to make a nice picture of something. And then we've taught her some legacy stuff. So now she knows how to do a print ad. So we taught her how to lay it out and to interact with the publisher. The young people do it in a way that our engineers absolutely cannot, right? So our engineers were like, make an ad, and it's very technical with right angles, you know. But, you know, the kids today breathe this stuff, and, you know, she's been posting on her TikToks and stuff for years. And so having that you know, fresh enthusiasm for it is a really, you know, great for the company, but it's another source for us to get someone trained. And we've done this quite a few times. One of them we actually ended up hiring, and she stayed with us for like 3 or 4 years before she moved on to something else.
I will say that there are IIP grants to companies that hire non-scientists and MBA students and things like that. So we do.
What's that program?
Yeah, what's that program?
And we hire it through IIP. So you
Through
can put an
IIP?
IIP application in for an MBA student. So we'll put that in the list for your applications for next year.
time, yeah.
I will just say that I think that question on sort of expectations of experience is a great one to ask the company when you get to that point of interviewing and moving through the process. One of the things that I have to say all the time when I'm talking either to companies applying to IIP for grants or to students that are looking to apply is it depends, which is a very unsatisfying answer. But I get the question a lot about, you know, how much do interns get paid? What's the hours? What's the expectations? And the reality is, as much as we're talking about internships as this broad category, you know, we have IIP internships this year that are looking for, you know, they were looking for undergraduate biology majors having finished their first year of undergrad, and we had others that were looking for postdocs with very specific skill sets. Like internship is a huge category of experience, and different ones have different expectations. And if you just sort of assume that all internships are going to want the same thing, you're going to get very lost very quickly. And so really the best way to get an answer about what a particular company is looking for is to ask them. And put that forth. You know, the interview process really should be that conversation. And, you know, as much as I wish that every time I had an answer very specifically when someone asks about what the experience should be or what a particular situation is like, it depends. And it depends quite a bit on the different company and the different internship.
We do have like a couple more questions online. Some of them we've answered already. For a current graduate student in the 2nd or 3rd year, what kind of internship opportunities could be available? And would they be denied if they're only available for 6 to 10 weeks?
I think the beauty of someone doing their PhD is they could come in and do an actual project versus just learning how to take apart a fermenter. So they could actually come in and if they came in with a suggested project, I think that's even better. If they said, hey, you know what, I have these skills and I'm just wondering, I have an interest in doing this type of project. For me, the timing is not so important. I mean, we typically bring in interns for 2 months. And if they are through the IIP, what we've done the last 2 years is done 32 hours a week where they get Fridays off. So they work a full day, Monday through Thursday, because it's the summer. And they want to have long weekends. They also want to, you know, have some fun. And so, but we do 8 hours a day. And we always ask them, is that cool, or you want to do it something different? If they ever said, I want to do it differently, we would accommodate, but nobody's ever said that. So, but I think for a PhD, that would be the value I would see, is they come in with a different type of experience that they could actually almost dictate what the project is.
I think at that second or third year PhD, that's like a natural point where you're questioning, where's my career going, right? That's a point where you can pivot and stick with the PhD or decide I'm done with this. So it is a valuable thing to get an internship experience that relates to what you're doing in your PhD. So I wouldn't just leave your PhD and do an internship in some orthogonal direction. But like Tony said, if it relates to their PhD research and they're doing something where their skills bring to bear, that can really help someone focus in on what they want to do with their career. Could be very valuable. I encourage PhD students to do an internship. I can't say that every advisor does. Some people are very greedy with their PhD students. No, you can't do that. So my advice is talk with your advisor first before you go accept an internship, because you get some upset feelings that way.
And just quickly, just to reiterate, smaller companies, more flexibility.
And by the way, I think probably all of us have worked in big companies, big multinational companies. So if you ever said, hey, how's it different? Most of us could probably tell you how it's different and what we like better, and maybe what we don't like as much. So I think don't assume you won't get some exposure to that through just, mentorship.
Right, I think the last question online is a question about how to pursue internships that pay below the standard of living. Is how can we pursue internships that don't pay?
They want to be paid less?
It's how can they afford to take an internship if it pays below the standard of living?
It's hard. I mean, you have to make ends meet. You could probably recognize that this is a career development experience, and you may operate at less than what you need, but obviously you can't run up huge credit card bills trying to do an internship. So pragmatically, I'd say you got to make sure that you get your needs met, and if otherwise it may not be the internship for you.
Or, be creative and come up with a solution. So you've got a day job or you've got a part-time job that pays the bills, and you do an internship that's not full-time. Because guess what? When you have put it on your resume, you don't say I only did this 8 hours a week, or I did this 40 hours a week. Or it could just be a shortened, hey, I did a project for a month, and I worked 20 hours a week during that month. I saved up money so I wouldn't have to. I think there's a way to do it, but it is going to be challenging if you're relying on full-time work to pay the bills.
This may get a little political, but what the heck? I really dislike the fact that this is a question for some students, especially economically challenged students, because the playing field is not level when they have to be asked, like, I need to eat, or I need to contribute to my family budget, or I do that, or I get this enriching experience. It puts people in really challenging positions. There are some colleges, one in particular that I work with through my program, that gives students grants so that the school give them $2,000 or $3,000 for the summer so they can pursue the under or no paid internship. But there are ways to do it. It's flexible, but I often question the companies, like, who do you expect can actually fill this position?
Yeah, and I don't want to necessarily sit up here and say negative things about companies that I don't know or with the situation. I do think it is something to be thoughtful about. Like, when we run the IIP program, we try to be as forward as we can about giving money to the companies to provide meaningful salary. We've increased the grant over a few years because I do think it also speaks to what the company is expecting of the intern and how they are going to be treated through that experience, and whether they are a valued part of the team or whether they are just someone to complete some task and be used as a tool and put away. Which just doesn't mean I don't want to tell someone not to to take an internship if it's an experience that they need. But I do think it is part of what you need to think about when you're looking at where is the best fit for you.
We got one more question online if no one else in the room has a question. This person says, "Hi, thank you for this insightful session. I'm an international researcher with prior experience in biotechnology and cancer research outside the US. I'm currently looking for internship opportunities to gain US-based experience and strengthen my professional profile here. What would you recommend as the best ways to approach this? And are there specific programs or labs that are open to candidates like me?"
So I've had some experience with international candidates, and the visa issue, particularly now, can be quite a stumbling block. If you are registered and you're here on a student visa, you can get, OPT, which allows you to work for a limited time for a company. If you're pursuing an actual work visa, you're probably not going to get it through an internship. It's just not, something that's feasible for a company to spend that much time and money to arrange for a visa. That being said, if you're here studying on a student visa, there are provisions for you to go work for a company. The important thing is then just to work with the visa office at your institution to arrange for that type of clearance, the OPT.
Yeah, so unless we have any other questions, I think that's a good stopping point. And I'd like to extend my thanks to everyone on the panel and to David for all of your wonderful insights. And I'd like everyone to be sure to join us on August 21st for our next event. Thanks. We still have the refreshments out, and there's another 30 minutes for networking. So please stay and do that.
Susan, can I add one thing? Just one thing. So you're in your internships, you want to do well, but let's be realistic. You're going to make mistakes. If you Google the Dear Intern Twitter campaign, have any of you got, oh my gosh. So HBO Max, one of their interns put out this kind of random email. It was a mistake. And then HBO Max sent an email to the customers that received it saying it was the intern's fault. Now, come on, that's bad. So people started this campaign, Dear Intern, and they're all sharing the things they did, big and small, that make them human in their jobs, either full-time. So read it, and when you make your mistakes, don't take yourself so seriously. So I just wanted to leave with that. Thank you. All right.
Thank you for this great
Thank you. Getting out.
gravity assist.
Oh, this is-
Yes, please. He's a friend of mine.